What's up everyone on the internet? Thank you for making this video part. I'm so excited to upload this one for you guys because for this video we'll be taking a look at an anime series that's taking me a long time to get into, and that would be JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So a few months ago I decided to give this series a shot after seeing a lot of memes all over social media, to where I just hopped onto Netflix, found season 1, and just clicked play. So the first season of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was released back in 2012, and based on how the series is structured, apparently the show is broken up into several different parts, where in each part the story introduces a new JoJo for viewers to follow. So for part 1, the story is set in the late 1800s, where we follow the rich Joestar family who have been saved by the Brandos, who are just common peasants. Fast forward several years later, the story introduces Jonathan Joestar, aka Jojo, and Dio Brando, who is by far one of the best anime villains I've seen in years. More on that later. But anyway, the story takes off as we see these two stepbrothers get acquainted with one another, as they don't hit it off so well within the first few episodes. I mean, yeah, I'd hate my stepbrother too if he kicked my dog, punched me in the face, and then forcefully kissed my girlfriend. And as the story moves forward, we see how Dio has an overall end game where he wants to see himself on top of the pecking order by any means necessary. That is if he can get past Jojo, who almost reminds me of a telenovela hero who goes on an incredible hero's journey in order to stop Dio. And one of the things that I loved about the first part is how this character embodies the virtues of being a hero. Throughout the first part, we see how this JoJo is noble, but isn't afraid to throw hands with anybody who may endanger him or his friends. Now, as we move further in, the story introduces the concept of Hamon, which is a fighting technique that uses the sun in order to help fight against vampires. Oh yeah, I may have forgotten to mention that this first season's got vampires. As I mentioned earlier, some of the reasons why I think Dio is now one of my favorite villains of all time is the fact that he is precise, and more importantly, he is patient. Throughout the first few episodes, we see him play the long game as he figures out how to be the man in charge. So when he, spoiler alert, becomes a vampire thanks to an ancient mask, he was already a problem as it is, but now that he's got vampire abilities, this forces Jojo to step up his game as he sees that his stepbrother is far too gone to be saved, which leads to some very impressive action scenes as we see both Jojo and Dio go toe-to-toe with one another throughout the first part of the series. And we haven't even talked about Dio's muda moments. I mean, if you're gonna give this guy a catchphrase, the series nails it with that simple phrase. Sometimes I even catch myself saying it a few times. All the more reason to love Dio, as it sort of adds more charm to his character. One of the things that I never really mention in my anime videos is that I never really talk about the opening. I enjoy anime openings as they kind of serve as a gateway into J-pop, where my top 3 favorite artists are Lisa, Rihanna, and Franshushu. With that being said, I think that this may be one of my favorite anime openings of all time. Now that may be a bold claim, but I just love how the music is upbeat and pretty much tells the story of the hero's journey as he's getting ready to stand up for what is right and take on the challenge head on. And ever since I've watched this series, I have never felt so pumped with any other JoJo OP, and if the moment ever comes, I'll be ready to sing Sono Shino Sadame at karaoke night. With that being said, that'll do it for part 1, known as Phantom Blood, which now leads us into part 2 of season 1, known as Battle Tendency. Now, one of the things I was kind of bummed out was the fact that part 1 is only 9 episodes long, while the remainder of the first season focuses on part 2. But when you think about it, it kind of makes sense that if you can fit 2 parts into one season, you may as well. Anyway, part 2 takes place several decades after the events of part 1, where we now follow the new JoJo, Joseph Joestar, who is a lot different from Jonathan. Because when you look at the two of them, you can clearly see a distinct difference, where the first JoJo was a gentleman, while this new JoJo acts more like a young rebel. And even though Joseph is a lot different from what we saw in Jonathan, it works in the show's favor as viewers can now pick which JoJo they prefer. More on that later. But anyway, the overall plot of the story focuses more on Joseph learning more about Hamon, as he now has to go up against the same superpower beings who created the stone mask that gave Dio his powers. Everyone, meet the Pillar Men. Holy crap! Okay, I love Dio, but he never had a soundtrack that was this badass. Seriously, look up Pillarman theme on YouTube and just read through some of the comments, because there are some that are pretty funny. Here are a few good ones that I really liked. I hope my first day as a cashier goes well. Karen, Susan, and Margaret. As someone who worked as a cashier at a Dollar Tree, I can understand how cashiers feel when they meet crazy people. Here's another one that got me laughing. Coronavirus, enter my body. The 3 vitamin gummies I ate in the morning. Better eat those vitamins, kiddos. One more, and this one really got me laughing. Teacher, it's fun. There's only 3 questions on the test. The 3 questions. Right, as someone who has taken several exams where it at least takes an hour just to solve one problem, I have never laughed this hard at a comment before, as it is so true. So that comment gets a thumbs up. Anyway, going back to the music, the vocals used on this score are on a whole different level, as you can feel the ancient yet powerful aspect of the song when you see these dudes come on screen and just wreck shop. If I ever need an entrance song to whatever event I'm going to, I want this song to play every time I enter the room. But anyway, going back to the main story, one of the reasons why I enjoy part 2 more than part 1 is the fact that we get to see Joseph go on a similar hero's journey, but done a lot better. For starters, we see him go through a training arc that almost feels like Rocky, as we see him train constantly as he's preparing for a big fight with one of the big villains. Another thing that I liked about part 2 is how Joseph's personality brings some humor to the show. One of the running gags in part 2 is how this Jojo is so quick-minded and is such a wise guy that he knows exactly what his opponent is going to say. And when those moments happen, it usually means that this Jojo is about to come out on top in any situation. Another thing that I also liked about part 2 is the variety of characters, as things do start to get a little weird because it is called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But unlike other series like Akame ga Kill, having a wide variety of characters works well if they fit in the world around them. Like in both part 1 and 2, one of my favorite side characters is Speedwagon, who is your go-to man that you can definitely rely on. And since we're still in part 2, one of my other favorite side characters is Stroheim, who is the German soldier slash scientist who sort of reminds me of the Terminator. And going back to the subject of music, his theme is pretty badass, as it represents the strong military power that goes hand in hand with his unique abilities. With that being said, looking back at both part 1 and 2, if I had to pick favorites, I would say that my favorite storyline is definitely part 2, whereas my favorite Jojo is, as of now, still Jonathan. But overall, I had a really fun time watching the first season. For part 1, you get a sort of telenovela story as you see Jonathan go on a hero's journey, whereas in part 2, you get to see Joseph go through an underdog training arc. And with that out of the way, I can't wait to talk about part 3 in my next video. Well, that's gonna do it for this video, guys. That was my overall view for season 1 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. If you like what you saw, click the subscribe button so you can get all these updates from this channel. I'll see you next time with a brand new video. Bye-bye.